Hey, Patel, and welcome back to the Kristen Hawkins Show. Today, we're going to talk about how the abortion industry is excited to finally announce what I've been saying for the past 10 years, in that emergency contraceptives can kill babies. Next, I'm going to talk about some of the top pro-life news of the last week. One of the top stories being Dave Delighted and Sandra Merritt had their charges dropped against them in California. They are the undercover journalists that exposed the Planned Parenthood baby body parts trafficking ring. I'm also going to talk about what we saw last week at the RFK Jr. and Cash Patel confirmation hearings on Capitol Hill. There's going to be a note about why Planned Parenthood must be defunded, as they're spending millions to fund our political enemies. And finally, we're going to talk about the passing of Cecile Richards, who presided over and grew Planned Parenthood's killing operation for more than a decade. The question is, what does her death mean for the pro-life and pro-abortion movement? So let's jump right in. I'm going to warn you, this first topic is a little heavy, and I've got resources from doctors. I'm going to link them in the show notes because it's going to be a little dense. First thing I want to talk about is the new ELA abortion protocol. So ELA is labeled by the FDA as an emergency contraceptive. It is not the same as the morning after pill. It's kind of like the cousin of RU486. But when ELA came on the market, the goal was, morning after pill, you're supposed to take the morning after unprotected sex. ELA can be taken up to 3 days or maybe even as long as 5 days after unprotected sex. The abortion lobby has said for years, even went to the Supreme Court, saying that ELA was not an abortifacient. It was merely a contraceptive, which, if you Google the word contraceptive, you can tell it's a little different than abortifacient, right? A contraceptive is supposed to prevent conception from occurring. So to prevent the egg from being released from the woman or the mother's ovary, right? So conception, a new unique human life, cannot be conceived. But that's not what just ELA does only. ELA is a little bit more advanced than just hormonal birth control. Hormonal birth control, the morning after pill, is supposed to be just to prevent the egg from being released. It doesn't always, because we all probably know someone who was conceived when their mom was on birth control. We also know for years on the back of the Plan B box, the makers and manufacturers literally said it could prevent a fertilized egg, Google it, a new human being, from being implanted into the uterine lining, i.e. an early abortion. Now, recently, the FDA has said that Plan B can take that warning off the box. It's really hard to test this ethically, but we know it can happen because it can cause and does cause the lining of the uterus to shed, meaning the child can't implant. So we've always kind of have had a word of caution when it comes to hormonal contraceptives in general, plus the morning after pill, because we know this could be a potential outcome. Now, ELA is, more advanced than Plan B, and you don't hear about ELA as much. ELA is actually a progesterone blocker, similar to the RU486 cocktail, the first pill in the RU486 cocktail, the chemical abortion cocktail, mifepristone. So if you remember from my past podcasts, mifepristone, the first drug in the RU486 cocktail, prevents progesterone. It stops progesterone. What does progesterone do early in pregnancy? It basically feeds the baby, keeps the baby alive. So if you block progesterone, you kill the baby. And then the second pill in chemical abortion, mifepristone, then expels the dead baby. That is why, when you always talk about chemical abortion pills, we talk about a cocktail because it's 2 pills. The first pill to kill, the second pill to expel. So ELA is kind of a cousin of mifepristone in that it is a progesterone blocker. So ELA is supposed to act like a contraceptive, meaning it's supposed to prevent the egg from being released from the woman's ovary, and it's supposed to do that closer to ovulation than a woman it takes in the morning after pill. I'm sorry, I'm trying to break this down in like layman's terms because You don't want to know the long 30 minutes I just went into researching this for you. So Ella is supposed to block the egg from being released from the ovary. However, if the egg has already been released and Ella has been taken 3 to 5 days after unprotected sex, it will act as a progesterone blocker, meaning it can starve the child, kill the child, so then the child dies. So the abortion industry knows, we have not kept it a secret, that we are coming after RU486. And there's a lot of different ways to come after RU486, right? The fact that the FDA never did the required environmental testing in 2000. Every single time they've investigated it since then, they've never done the required environmental testing. And I'm going to get into this later. We have RFK talking about how President Trump has asked RFK to investigate the safety of mifepristone, that first drug in the chemical abortion cocktail, as the new HHS secretary, because we know the ER rates are astonishing when women are taking these drugs at home. So they know we're coming after them. We just had a whole article last week in Politico. I should put the link here, where we talk about using the devil's tools, using environmental law to attack chemical abortion pills, because I've already demonstrated to you all how we know mifepristone, this progesterone blocker, actually remains active after it passes through the mother's body, after she deposits the dead child in her toilet, after she floods the baby down the toilet. These progesterone blocking metabolites, 3 of them to be precise, remain active and actually are passing through our wastewater treatment plants and still active at our tap water. Yeah, we should all be concerned. I drink from a well coming from some mountain snow, so I'm covered, but the rest of y'all, you need to get some good filters, okay? So they know we're coming after them. So what we've seen recently is the abortion industry, because remember, they're about making money, scrambling to come up with an alternative to RU486. There's been articles in the Washington Post about how they want to have a 1-pill cocktail, which isn't going to change the environmental concerns we have. But this study that came out just a week or so ago about Ella is concerning, because their goal is to potentially use Ella as the first drug in the chemical abortion pill cocktail, then use the second drug, which they already use, mifepristone, to expel. So they would use Ella to kill, because it's also a progesterone blocker like mifepristone, and then use the second drug that they already do, mifepristone, to expel the dead baby. I know it's confusing, but what you need to understand is that the abortion industry is scrambling to what they call protect abortion access, and what we call to continue to kill more babies and make more money. What's really interesting to me is not this, because we knew they've been doing it. It's that they finally admitted to the whole world that Ella kills babies, after they literally went to the Supreme Court, after they've been arguing for years that emergency contraceptives don't end life. After, I can't tell you how many times I've been quoted in like New York Times articles, like anti-abortion extremist Kristen Hawkins even peddles these lies that emergency contraceptives can kill children. Yeah, now I've been proven right. I want apologies from all of these newspapers. I'm going to show you this video of me. Actually, I was at a Kroger in, I think, Houston with a teammate at one point, and just picked up the Plan B box and was showing her, and I explained to the video where it actually says, and has been saying for years, that Plan B can potentially kill human beings and cause an abortion. So take a look at this clip.
So I was asked this the other day on campus. This is Plan B. It says will not harm the existing pregnancy. So it says on the big thing, everyone says, oh, it's birth control. It's not a big deal, Kristen. Zoom in. Now, other information. Or this product works mainly by preventing ovulation, which is that's contraception, non-abortion. It may also prevent fertilization, released egg. Okay, not non-abortion, contraceptive. Or attachment of a fertilized egg, Google that word, Google fertilized egg, because it's embryo, to the uterus, implantation. Plan B is an abortifacient. Pass it on.
All right, so the key takeaway for everyone to realize is that The battle for to end chemical abortion pills is not going to be one and done. Even if Students for Life, when we prove to the public how chemical abortion pills, mifepristone, the first drug in the chemical abortion cocktail, is harming every American, pro-life and pro-choice, by polluting our drinking water, even if we Aaron Brockovich that case and win billions of dollars of damages of what they've done to us the past 25 years since being approved in 2000, this isn't going to be done. The abortion industry is always going to be finding a new drug to kill babies. And so I think we have to always be on our guard about this and speaking out. And by the way, and now's the time to be really having that conversation on social media of, yes, emergency contraceptives can kill human beings. Look, a New England Journal of Medicine report about Ella is actually admitting it and proving it. I mean, in this report that was just released, they said if they use Ella, which they call unipristol, and mifepristol, that second drug in chemical abortion, if they do a combo those two pills, 97% of women will have abortions. So it's obviously killing human babies. And now I think it's time for us to be vocal about that we have been telling America and the world the truth for years, despite all of their lies. We've done undercover investigations on this. In 2013, I had one of our team members, he still probably is angry, pose as a sex predator, as a rapist, and bring in a 15-year-old volunteer, proving that sex predators can get their hands on these drugs super easily, even going up to a pharmacist and having a conversation, and the pharmacist still sold the drugs to a man who was clearly in his 40s, who's saying his girlfriend, who clearly looked like she was 15 or 16, and sold multiple doses to cover up their crimes. So this is something that we have been concerned about in the pro-life movement for literally over a decade and have been warning about. Now is the time for us to keep telling the truth about morning after pills, Plan B, and Ella, and the chemical abortion pill, and how all three of them can kill human babies. Next up, let's talk about two pro-life heroes in California. So, as you all know, David Daleiden and his associate Sandra Merritt have been under criminal charges. They've been facing felony charges in California since Kamala Harris was the Attorney General of California. Because when David Daleiden in 2015 exposed to the whole world that Planned Parenthood was selling human babies, the remains of human babies, for money for these research firms, California got really mad because in some of his videos, he was in California. He was filming in California. So Planned Parenthood and their ally at the state house, Kamala Harris, got together and conspired to go after David Daleiden using laws that say it's illegal to videotape, even though no other activists, like human rights activists, like PETA activists, have ever been charged on this. Attorney General Kamala Harris raided David Daleiden's one-bedroom apartment with agents, guns drawn, took all of the footage, and then filed 18 felony charges against David Daleiden and Sandra Merritt, who was one of his researchers and undercover investigators. They have been fighting this for years, since 2015. And these were some pretty scary accounts, these felony accounts. And the judges were, the one judge in San Francisco was on the board, or his wife was on the board of Planned Parenthood, wouldn't recuse himself, even though we knew there was clearly a conflict of interest. It was clearly politically motivated lawfare. What President Trump has gone through, yeah, David went through it, and I would argue even worse. So this has been going on for years. Well, last week, California announced they were going to drop their case against David Daleiden and Sandra Merritt. Drop it completely. They had to file no contest on one felony charge of illegal recording, but they agreed to, as long as they stayed away from everybody they filmed, there would be no sentencing for the felony, to plead no contest. So it's not like a full pardon, but it's about as good as you're going to get coming from California. The quotes are astounding. If you even talk to David Zelion's attorney, who is one of the lead prosecutors in LA County, talking about how this has never happened in the history of California, and how they directly targeted David and Sandra simply for being pro-life. It's absolutely outrageous what California did. So it's a huge victory to see California drop all these charges. David and Sandra will not be going to jail. They are clear, free to go. It's a massive. I mean, let's think about why Planned Parenthood was so angry, right? And you might be like, well, why is Planned Parenthood so angry? Why were they working with Kamala Harris, conspiring Kamala Harris to attack him? Well, David filmed Planned Parenthood high ups, like the head doctor at Planned Parenthood, Deborah Nucatola. Remember, she was eating salad and sipping wine, laughing about how she would alter a late-term abortion procedure so it wasn't like a partial birth abortion. She would just pull off a leg or an arm before killing the baby and stabbing the baby in the back of the neck, so therefore wasn't violating the federal Partial Birth Abortion Prevention Act. You had the abortionist in Pasadena. You remember, she kind of looks very ghoulish. She was like haggling over the price of the body parts over lunch and saying how she wanted a Lamborghini. These videos were astounding, and I think shocked the conscience of the nation. Now that these charges have been dropped against these two heroes, now is the time, 9 years later, by the way, now is the time for us to reinvigorate this conversation, bring these videos back to the forefront to once again shock America, who's probably forgotten, unlike us, about this baby body parts undercover investigation, because this is the conversation that needs to happen right now when we have Doge cutting things left and right. I was reading a tweet from Elon Musk this weekend talking about how they have to cut $4 billion a day for the next year in order to cut $1 trillion of our spending, because we're overspending by like $2 trillion a year. Yeah, it's a big problem. And an easy one should be cutting all $700 million going to Planned Parenthood from taxpayers. But it's not going to be as easy as we wish it were. And so now is the time for us, especially now that California has dropped all of these charges, to speak up. I want to read for you a statement from David Zelien that he released on X after this happened, because I wasn't even expecting this to happen. It just kind of came out of the blue. David said, after enduring 9 years of weaponized political prosecution, putting an end to the lawfare launched by Kamala Harris is a huge victory for my investigative reporting and for the public's right to know the truth about Planned Parenthood's sale of aborted baby body parts. Now we all must get to work to protect families and infants from the criminal abortion industrial complex. And then David's attorney, who I mentioned, the former Los Angeles district attorney, Steve Cooley, said, quote, he's never seen such a blatant exercise of selective investigation and vindictive prosecution, and that Kamala Harris and her colleagues, quote, should be ashamed for weaponizing their office. Yeah. Now, speaking of weaponized offices, this past week we saw some heated confirmation hearings up on Capitol Hill for some key cabinet positions, and as they are relevant to pro-lifers. So I want to dig into that now. All right, so President Trump has nominated some, I would say, out of the mainstream folks to head up these cabinet positions, right? Which are pretty important positions. I mean, you can think about Pete Hegseth now being the Department of Defense Secretary. That really shook up Washington, D.C. One of the other really big names and folks that the President Trump nominated, it was RFK Jr. to head up the Department of Health and Human Services. Now, there was a big hearing last week, a couple of days of hearings actually with RFK Jr. About his objective as being HHS secretary. What did he know? What does he want to do? And for pro-lifers, we were really concerned because of his past pro-abortion statements, what he was going to say when it came to abortion-related issues. So first, I want to watch this video with you.
In the punitive measures that came on my state for those that are in rural health care, how are you going to handle Title 10?
I'm going to support President Trump's policies on Title 10. I agree with President Trump that every abortion is a tragedy. I agree with him that we cannot be a moral nation if we have 1.2 million abortions a year. I agree with him that the states should control abortion. President Trump has asked me to study the safety of mifepristone. He has not yet taken a stand on how to regulate it. Whatever he does, I will implement those policies, and I will work with this committee, make those policies make sense.
Okay, I just want to back it up. So Senator Langford saying punitive measures. Students for Life Action helped pass a bill in Oklahoma. We are the lead organization on this, the Life at Conception Act, which ended all abortions in the state of Oklahoma. Pretty big freaking deal. As retaliation, the Biden-Harris HHS told the state of Oklahoma, and I didn't know this until Senator Langford personally told me this, told the state of Oklahoma, unless you refer and use our reproductiverights.org, whatever website, and tell women in your state where they can get abortion, we're going to withhold key federal funding from HHS to your state. Some of this funding was for AIDS patients. That's where he's talking about. This is big, okay, because this is a seemingly pro-choice man who's going to be likely confirmed as our HHS secretary, saying he's going to do what President Trump asks him to do and tells him to do. The reality is that we've got to continue to push President Trump and push that pro-life agenda in this new Trump administration, because what he said is key. One, he admitted every abortion is a tragedy and we can't be a moral nation killing 1.2 million kids a year. Good start. I would agree with you, my friend, and you almost sound like you're pro-life. Two, RFK talked about investigating the safety of mifepristone, saying the president directly asked him. Remember, from the earlier segment, mifepristone is that first drug in the chemical abortion cocktail. The one I'm telling you is also polluting our drinking water. This means what we are saying is being heard by this White House. That is a very good position to start in. The reality is that mifepristone literally spells death for children for one party every time, and can spell death and danger for the second party, the mom, and also affects all of us. There's no other drug on the market that was literally invented just to kill people. All other drugs on our market have a risk-benefit analysis done. Doctors have to weigh the risks of prescribing the drug with the benefits that the patient might have from taking them, like the side effects. Mifepristone is the only drug on the market that can't pass this test because there's literally zero therapeutic benefit to starving a child to death and killing a child. No risks would outweigh this drug's benefits. So it's really good that RFK is saying that they're considering and they want to investigate the safety of mifepristone, that first drug in the chemical abortion cocktail. We also heard things from RFK during the committee hearings that, one, he thought that we should end human embryonic fetal stem cell research. That's good. He agreed that late-term abortion should be ended. Duh. I mean, everyone should agree with that, except I guess if you're Kamala Harris. He also talked about committed to appointing, pro-life Republican conservative leaders to HHS, protecting conscience protections for pro-life doctors and nurses. That was huge. We also saw President Trump and RFK talk about how we shouldn't have federal funding for abortions. So we definitely have had some good steps in the right direction last week. I think this means, and this is what we've been saying all along at Students for Life, even though RFK Jr. doesn't agree with us 100% on this issue, I think he's willing, and we think he's willing to have a conversation. And I think that's what we saw yet last week in the confirmation hearings, that he's willing to have a conversation. If he's been charged by the president to study the safety of mifepristone, that means it's going to have to be a long conversation. So we are certainly in a much better place than we would have been if Kamala Harris had been elected president of the United States. I can't even express to you how bad it would have been if Kamala Harris had been elected and who she would have appointed to the head of HHS. I mean, very realistically, you could have seen someone who was like the head of Planned Parenthood heading up HHS. So love or hate President Trump, you have to admit we are in a much better place today than we would have been if Kamala Harris would have won. And if you stayed home and didn't vote, shame on you. All right, Kash Patel. So Kash Patel is up and for his confirmation hearings, And, it's been really interesting because he's up for this FBI director. And I didn't really know too much about Patel. He definitely has had firsthand experience about a lawfare and politically motivated and corrupt DOJ. He definitely knows what it's like to be in the crosshairs of people who hate you, not for something you've done illegally, but because you don't share their political goals. So I think he's got a lot in common with President Trump. I think this experience will make him very sensitive to the issue of political targeting that pro-lifers endured and suffered under the Biden-Harris administration. He actually told Senator Chuck Grassley from Iowa, in basically no uncertain terms, that he would make sure no American is subjected to that kind of abuse from government ever again. I want to show you a clip here.
Senator, this may be one of the scenarios that most uniquely qualifies me to take command at the FBI. Having been the victim of government overreach and a weaponized system of justice and law enforcement, I know what it feels like to have the full weight of the United States government barreling down on you. And as the Biden Inspector General determined, those activities by the FBI and DOJ were wholly improper and not predicated upon law and facts. I will ensure, if confirmed, that no American is subjected to that kind of torment, to that kind of cost, financially and personally. And most importantly, I will make sure that no American is subjected to death threats like I was, and subjected to moving their residences like I was, because of government overreach, because of leaks of information about my personal status. If confirmed as FBI director, Mr. Chairman, you have my commitment that no one in this country will feel that pain.
That's huge. I mean, he's serious. And I think that's great. And I think the direct conversation he had with the senators, I think it was Senator Hawley who started questioning him about the FBI. If you remember the field office in Richmond's doing a memo, how they had sent FBI agents into Latin masses in Virginia, because that's like where potential terrorists and domestic terrorists could come out. Was everybody who goes to a 2-hour Latin mass. Yeah, that wouldn't happen again. As I mentioned earlier, Planned Parenthood has never, David released these videos into 2015. There was a national uproar, but really Planned Parenthood has never faced, federal law enforcement consequences for trafficking human body parts, for selling the body parts of babies they abort. It is long past time that actual federal criminals like those at Planned Parenthood come under the scrutiny of the nation's federal law enforcement agencies, and that's not pro-lifers. So I think Kash Patel and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. could do an incredible amount of good for the pro-life movement, for justice, and for the health of our nation. And I look forward to keeping the pressure on. We have said numerous times why President Trump, Congress, and DOJ needs to act quickly to debar and defund Planned Parenthood of our more than $700 million of taxpayer funds. But I think the most convincing argument we have for President Trump and this new administration that I need your help echoing is that President Trump must stop funding his political enemies. Our federal government should not be funding organizations that use their profits, the profits they get because they're getting federal funding, to undermine the president's agenda by funding his enemies to the tunes of tens of millions of dollars. And that's exactly what Planned Parenthood does election year after election year. According to a recent news article we had up at Students for Life Action's blog, PBS said Planned Parenthood was bragging that they were going to spend over $40 million ahead of this past November's election to bolster President Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. They actually, though, if you look at the real numbers, got closer to spending more than $70 million during the election cycle. $69.5 million was the last number I've seen. And according to a 42-page IRS complaint that my friends at 40 Days for Life filed in December, they've actually breached their 501c3 status. So that's their nonprofit status, which allows them to be like a tax-deductible charity, because we know they were allowing, Planned Parenthood in Florida was allowing the Kamala Harris operation campaign to operate out of their federally taxpayer-funded location in Florida. any so-called nonprofit that kills babies receives $700 million a year in taxpayer funds, who breaks the law during one of the most consequential presidential campaigns in the history of America, who we know sells human remains, human body parts of babies for money and now patents, they need to be held fully accountable. President Trump has the chance to finish this job. He began in the first term, and I know he's very proud of the title that some folks bestowed upon him in his first administration, most pro-life president ever. If he wants to remain the most pro-life president ever, he's got to defund Planned Parenthood. If he does that, he will cement his legacy, and he will be the most pro-life president probably until I run for office. All right. Last topic. I want to talk, just make a little note. It was really ironic. We saw that Cecile Richards, the former president of Planned Parenthood, she presided over the abortions at Planned Parenthood from 2006 to 2018. It was nearly 4 million children that died during her tenure. She actually died right before President Trump was sworn into office, just like hours before President Trump became the 47th president of the United States. We saw recently this fall, President Biden actually awarded Cecile Richards the Presidential Medal of Freedom, which if you Google what the Medal of Freedom is supposed to be for, it's, quote, America's highest civilian honor, award to individuals who make good Lord, I can't even say it. It's America's, quote, it's America's highest civilian honors given to those who contribute to the security of national interests in the United States, world peace, or cultural or other significant public or private endeavors. Cecile Richards did not deserve the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And it is absolutely astounding that someone who still says he is Catholic gave an award to a woman who presided over the largest baby killing entity in the world, Planned Parenthood, that presided over the deaths of 4 million children, one of whom she proudly declared was her own child, her fourth child. She did none of those things to qualify for the Presidential Medal of Freedom. I do think it's very ironic she died before President Trump was sworn in. It's symbolic, I guess you can say. Biden left, and now we have the most pro-life president in the Oval Office. I think for right now, our great prayer is that our leaders don't squander the fleeting and very precious opportunity we've been given to undo the damage inflicted in America by people like Cecile Richards. We were spared her legacy living on in a new presidential administration if Kamala Harris had been elected. And we know Planned Parenthood did all they could to make that happen. Thankfully, and by God's grace, they failed. We've got to work every day to ensure Cecile Richards' legacy dies with her. This legacy of ending precious human lives for profit, for mere convenience. And I'll do my best to pray for God to have mercy on her soul. So I hope you can join me in that. Thank you all for joining me today on this episode of the Kristen Hawkins Show. Make sure you're subscribing and follow along for more discussions like this. Make sure to leave a comment if you're watching this on YouTube. I do see those from time to time. If you want to hear from me daily and get a daily news alert, just a short news alert from me, make sure you join my personal text line. You just text Kristen, Kristan, to 53445, and you'll get the daily news alert. Make sure you, if you can, pass that on social media. We need more folks seeing kind of the daily news updates and commenting. You all comment on your social media from these news alerts. It helps us so much in the pro-life movement. But until next week, guys, keep up speaking up for the voiceless and standing for life. I'll be right there with you.